Cadet Sarah Chen pressed her face against the cold viewport of the transport ship Meridian's Edge, watching the stars blur past in hyperspace. 3 months into her first deep space assignment, she still couldn't get used to the sight. The Academy had prepared her for many things, but not for the loneliness of space travel. "Wolverine, come here, boy," she called softly to the corner of her small quarters. A stocky, muscular creature emerged from behind her storage locker. Tank wasn't like the Wolverines from old Earth that Sarah had studied in xenobiology class. This was a Proxima Wolverine, genetically enhanced and bred on the colony world where Sarah grew up. Tank stood nearly 3 feet tall at the shoulder, with midnight black fur streaked with silver. His claws could tear through titanium plating, and his bite could crush steel pipes. But right now, he was just her companion, nuzzling against her leg with surprising gentleness. "Good boy." Sarah scratched behind his ears, feeling the tension in her shoulders ease. Tank had been with her since she was 12, a gift from her father before he died in the Outer Rim conflicts. The military academy had initially refused to let her bring Tank, but after demonstrating his training and intelligence, they'd made an exception. Tank wasn't just a pet. He was a certified companion animal with security clearance. The ship's intercom crackled to life. "All personnel, we're dropping out of hyperspace in 15 minutes. Prepare for normal space transition." Sarah secured Tank in his travel harness and strapped herself into her bunk. The Meridian's Edge was carrying supplies to the research station at Kepler 442b, along with a dozen cadets like herself for their practical training rotations. It should have been a routine supply run. The hyperspace exit went smoothly, but something was wrong. Sarah felt it before she heard it, a subtle vibration through the hull that shouldn't have been there. Tank's ears perked up, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. "Contact!" someone shouted over the intercom. "Unknown vessels approaching fast!" Through her viewport, Sarah saw them. 3 ships with predatory angular designs unlike anything in the human fleet. They moved with lethal grace, cutting through space like sharks through water. Warning lights flashed red throughout the ship. "Battle stations! All personnel to emergency positions!" Sarah's training kicked in. She was supposed to report to the medical bay during combat situations, but something made her hesitate. Tank was agitated now, pacing in his harness and making sounds she'd never heard before, a mixture of growls and what almost sounded like words. The ship shuddered under weapons fire. The lights flickered and went out for a moment before emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. Through the intercom, Sarah heard Captain Morrison's voice, strained and urgent. "This is the UES Meridian's Edge. We are a civilian transport. Cease fire immediately." The response came in a language Sarah didn't recognize, but the translator system rendered it in cold mechanical tones. "Surrender your vessel. Resistance will result in termination." More weapons fire rocked the ship. Sarah could hear the hull groaning under the stress. Tank had gone completely still, his hackles raised and his lips pulled back to reveal teeth that gleamed like ivory daggers in the red light. "All hands, prepare to be boarded. I repeat, prepare to be boarded." Sarah's blood went cold. She'd heard stories about alien raiders in the Outer Rim, ships that attacked human vessels and took prisoners for reasons no one fully understood. The official reports always listed them as hostile, unknown entities, but the rumors among the cadets were much more specific and terrifying. Heavy impacts echoed through the ship as something large docked with their hull. Sarah could hear cutting tools working somewhere nearby, followed by the hiss of atmosphere equalizing. Then came sounds that made her stomach clench, inhuman voices speaking in that same alien language, and the distinctive whine of energy weapons. Tank pressed against her, his warmth reassuring even as his muscles coiled like springs ready to unleash. Sarah made a decision that would have gotten her court-martialed under normal circumstances. Instead of reporting to the medical bay, she grabbed her emergency kit and made her way toward her assigned battle station near the engine room. The corridors were chaos. Emergency lights cast dancing shadows on the walls, and the air tasted of ozone and fear. She passed other crew members heading to their stations, their faces grim with determination. No one questioned why she had Tank with her. In a crisis, normal regulations seemed less important than survival. She'd almost reached the engine room when she heard the screaming. It wasn't human screaming. It was something else entirely, a sound like metal tearing combined with the cry of a wounded animal. It was followed by the distinctive sound of energy weapons firing at full power, and then more of those inhuman voices, but now they sounded urgent, almost panicked. Sarah pressed herself against the wall, Tank beside her. Through the ship's intercom system, she could hear Captain Morrison trying to maintain order. All sections report. Sections 7 through 12 are compromised. Hostile borders are... The transmission cut off abruptly. Tank's ears swiveled forward, tracking sounds Sarah couldn't hear. His body language had changed completely. The anxious pacing was gone, replaced by the absolutely still alertness of a predator. Sarah had seen this before, during hunting trips on Proxima when dangerous prey was nearby. "What is it, boy?" she whispered. Before Tank could respond in his limited way, the corridor filled with an alien presence. They were tall, easily 7 feet, with elongated limbs that moved with disturbing fluidity. Their skin was a mottled gray-green that seemed to shift and change in the red emergency lighting. But it was their faces that made Sarah's breath catch. Elongated skulls with multiple rows of teeth visible through translucent skin, and eyes that reflected light like a nocturnal predator's. The lead creature carried what looked like an energy rifle, though its design was organic rather than mechanical, as if it had been grown rather than built. When it spotted Sarah, it made a sound that might have been laughter and raised the weapon. Tank exploded into motion. Sarah had seen her companion move fast before, but this was different. This was the speed of a creature whose ancestors had survived by killing or being killed. Tank crossed the 10-foot distance between them and the alien in less than a heartbeat, his claws extended and his jaws wide. The alien's weapon discharged, sending a bolt of coherent energy into the wall where Sarah had been standing a second before. Tank's claws raked across the creature's torso, and Sarah was shocked to see bright purple blood spray across the corridor walls. The alien shrieked, a sound like breaking glass mixed with a dying bird's cry, and tried to bring its weapon to bear on Tank. But the Wolverine was already moving, using his powerful hind legs to launch himself at the creature's throat. What happened next would be burned into Sarah's memory forever. Tank's jaws clamped down on the alien's neck, and there was a wet, crunching sound. The creature's shriek cut off abruptly, and it toppled backward with Tank still attached. The other two aliens raised their weapons, but Tank was already in motion again, rolling away from their fire and coming up in a crouch that would have done credit to any military combat instructor. Purple blood dripped from his muzzle, but his eyes were bright and alert. One of the aliens spoke rapidly in their language, and Sarah's translator picked up fragments. "Unknown creature. Extreme danger. Call for..." Tank didn't give them time to finish whatever they were planning. He charged the nearest alien, and this time Sarah saw exactly how he moved, not in a straight line, but in a weaving pattern that made him almost impossible to track with aimed fire. His claws found the alien's weapon arm first, shredding it with surgical precision. Then his weight carried him upward to the creature's head. The second alien screamed something that needed no translation, pure animal terror. It turned and ran, its long legs carrying it back toward wherever they'd entered the ship. Tank started to give chase, but Sarah called him back. "Tank, here, boy." He returned immediately, though she could see the predator's fire still burning in his eyes. Purple alien blood stained his fur, but he seemed unharmed. Sarah knelt beside him, running her hands over his body to check for injuries, and found none. "Good boy," she whispered, though the words seemed inadequate. Tank had just saved her life, and possibly the lives of everyone on the ship. The corridor was quiet now, except for the distant sounds of combat from other parts of the vessel. Sarah looked at the two dead aliens. She was certain they were dead, even though their biology was completely unfamiliar to her, and tried to process what had just happened. These creatures had boarded a human ship with the confidence of apex predators. They'd expected easy prey, soft targets that would surrender or die quickly. Instead, they'd encountered something they'd never seen before. A creature that was as much a predator as they were, but one that fought with intelligence and loyalty as well as fang and claw. The ship's intercom crackled back to life, and Captain Morrison's voice filled the corridor. All sections. Report status. The boarding parties are retreating. I repeat, the hostile boarding parties are retreating. Sarah activated her emergency communicator. Engineering section, Cadet Chen reporting, 2 hostile boarders neutralized, sector secure. There was a pause before Morrison responded. Cadet Chen, did you say neutralized? How? Sarah looked down at Tank, who was calmly cleaning alien blood from his claws. My companion animal encountered them, sir. They didn't survive the encounter. Another pause, longer this time. Understood, Cadet. Maintain position until security teams can reach you. As Sarah waited in the blood-stained corridor, she began to understand that something fundamental had just changed. The aliens had retreated not because they'd accomplished their mission, but because they'd encountered something unexpected and dangerous. They'd come hunting for weak human prey, and instead found predators of their own. Tank settled beside her, his breathing gradually returning to normal. But Sarah noticed that his ears remained alert, constantly moving to track sounds throughout the ship. He was still ready to fight, still protecting her and the crew with the same casual efficiency he'd shown against the aliens. For the first time since the attack began, Sarah smiled. The aliens had made a critical error in their understanding of humans. They'd assumed that because humans used tools and technology, they'd lost their connection to the natural world and its dangers. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The emergency lights had been restored to normal white illumination by the time Security Chief Rodriguez reached Sarah's position. She was a veteran of the Outer Rim conflicts, tough as recycled hull plating, but Sarah saw her eyes widen when she examined the alien corpses. Cadet, I need you to explain exactly what happened here, Rodriguez said, her voice carefully neutral. Sarah gave her report while Tank sat quietly beside her, though she noticed the Wolverine's attention wasn't on the conversation. His head kept turning toward the section where the boarding pods had attached to the ship, and occasionally he'd make a soft sound that she'd learned meant he was tracking something interesting. The creature acted independently? Rodriguez asked when Sarah finished. Tank responds to threats against me or anyone under my protection, Sarah explained. He's been trained for personal security since he was a cub, but his reaction time and combat effectiveness, I've never seen anything like that before. Rodriguez knelt down to examine the wounds on the nearest alien. These cuts are precise, almost surgical. And the bite patterns? She looked up at Tank with new respect. This wasn't random animal violence. Your companion knew exactly where to strike for maximum effect. Captain Morrison's voice echoed through the ship's intercom. All senior staff to the bridge. Emergency briefing in 10 minutes. Rodriguez stood up. Cadet Chen, I want you and your companion at that briefing. The captain needs to hear your report directly. The walk to the bridge gave Sarah time to observe the aftermath of the boarding action. Repair crews were already working on hull breaches, and she could see scorch marks from energy weapons throughout the corridors. But something struck her as odd. There were no other alien bodies anywhere else on the ship. Chief Rodriguez, Sarah said as they approached the bridge. Were there casualties in other sections? Rodriguez's expression darkened. That's what makes this so unusual, Cadet. The boarders took prisoners, grabbed 6 crew members and retreated to their ships before we could mount an effective response. Except for your section, they encountered no significant resistance. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. They were taking prisoners? Not trying to capture the ship? That's what we're trying to figure out. The bridge was buzzing with activity when they arrived. Captain Morrison stood near the main display, which showed tactical information about the 3 alien vessels. They'd withdrawn to a safe distance, but hadn't left the system entirely. "Ah, Cadet Chen," Morrison said when he saw her. "I understand we owe you and your companion a debt of gratitude. Your actions in engineering section may have prevented them from taking more prisoners." Tank had positioned himself where he could watch all the entrances to the bridge, his posture alert but not aggressive. Several of the bridge officers kept glancing at him nervously, especially when they noticed the dried purple stains on his fur. "Sir, I was just defending myself," Sarah said. Tank did what he's been trained to do. "Tell me about these aliens' behavior when your companion engaged them," Morrison said. "Everything you can remember." Sarah closed her eyes, replaying the encounter. "They seemed surprised, sir. The first one raised its weapon confidently, like it expected me to surrender or freeze up. When Tank attacked, it made sounds I'd never heard before. Fear, maybe? And the one that escaped was definitely terrified." Dr. Walsh, the ship's xenobiologist, looked up from a data pad. "That matches what we've observed from the sensor data. These creatures show all the behavioral patterns of apex predators: confidence, coordinated hunting tactics, efficient use of violence, but when they encountered unexpected resistance, they retreated immediately." "The question is," Morrison said, "what do they want with human prisoners, and why did they retreat so quickly after losing only 2 individuals?" Tank suddenly stood up, his ears forward and his body tense. A low growl rumbled in his chest, so quiet that only Sarah could hear it. "Captain," Sarah said, "Tank's detecting something. He's been tracking unusual sounds since the boarding action ended." Morrison gestured to the communications officer. "Lieutenant Hayes, any change in the alien's position?" "No, sir, they're maintaining distance, but—" Hayes frowned at his instruments. "I'm picking up some kind of transmission between their ships. It's encrypted, but the pattern suggests urgent communication." Dr. Walsh moved to another console. "Captain, I'm analyzing the biological samples from the deceased aliens. Their physiology is fascinating. They appear to be obligate carnivores with enhanced sensory organs and redundant nervous systems. Built for hunting." "Built for hunting what?" Morrison asked. "Based on their size and strength, I'd say prey roughly equivalent to large Earth mammals, possibly including humans." Walsh paused, studying her data. "But there's something else. These creatures have cybernetic implants integrated into their nervous systems. They're not just predators, they're enhanced predators." Tank's growling intensified, and Sarah could see the hackles rising along his neck. Something was happening that the ship's sensors weren't detecting. "Captain," Sarah said urgently, "Tank only acts like this when there's immediate danger. I recommend we—" The ship's proximity alarms began blaring. On the main display, they could see one of the alien vessels approaching at high speed. "Red alert," Morrison ordered. "All hands to battle stations." But instead of attacking, the alien ship stopped just outside weapons range and began transmitting. The message that came through the translators was unlike anything they'd received before. "Human vessel, we wish to communicate. We have proposal." Morrison exchanged glances with his senior staff. "Put them on speaker." The alien voice was different from the others they'd heard, deeper, more measured. "I am Hunt Leader Vashatai of the Kithara Collective. Your species has proven unexpected. We wish to discuss exchange." "What kind of exchange?" Morrison asked. "You have creature that killed our hunters. We have your people. We propose trade." Sarah felt sick. They want Tank in exchange for the prisoners. Negative, Morrison said immediately. We don't trade crew members for prisoners. Release our people immediately or face the consequences. There was a pause before Vashatai responded. You misunderstand. We do not fear your weapons. But creature that fights our hunters? This is new thing, interesting thing. We study it, we return your people. Simple exchange. Dr. Walsh was frantically working at her station. Captain, I'm analyzing their transmission patterns. They're not just communicating with us. They're sharing data with the other ships. Video files, bioscan data. They're studying Tank through our own sensors. Tank had moved closer to Sarah, pressing against her leg. She could feel the tension in his muscles, coiled and ready for action. But there was something else in his posture. Protectiveness. He wasn't just ready to fight. He was ready to protect everyone on the bridge. Your creature, Vashatai's voice continued. It kills our hunters with ease. This should not be possible. We are apex predators across 17 systems. We hunt, we conquer, we survive. But this creature, it is something new. Morrison keyed the communication system. The creature you're referring to is not a weapon. It's a companion animal protecting its human family. If you release our people, we can discuss a peaceful exchange of information. The response came immediately. Peaceful exchange is weakness. We take what we need for study. Your creature fights our hunters, so we learn from it. Then we adapt. Then we hunt more effectively. Dr. Walsh looked up from her console with alarm. Captain, they're not just interested in Tank for scientific curiosity. If they can understand how he defeated their hunters, they'll be able to develop countermeasures. It could give them a significant advantage in future conflicts with human vessels. Sarah realized the full implications of the situation. Tank hadn't just saved her life and the ship, he'd revealed a capability that could change the balance of power in this region of space. If these aliens could figure out how to counter the natural advantages that Earth-evolved predators had, humanity could lose one of its few advantages in the outer regions. There has to be another way, she said. Tank isn't just an animal, he's intelligent, trained, and loyal. You can't just hand him over to be dissected. Tank looked up at her and made a sound she'd never heard before, a complex vocalization that almost sounded like words. Dr. Walsh's head snapped up from her instruments. Did anyone else hear that? The Wolverine just produced sounds with linguistic structure, multiple tonal variations, consonant-vowel patterns. Before anyone could respond, Tank moved to the communications console and placed his paws on the interface. The action was deliberate, purposeful, and completely unprecedented. Tank, what are you doing? Sarah asked. The Wolverine looked directly at her and vocalized again, and this time Sarah was certain she heard meaning in the sounds. Not words exactly, but communication. Tank was trying to tell her something important. Morrison stared at the display in amazement. Dr. Walsh, is it possible that the creature is more intelligent than we realized? Much more intelligent, Walsh confirmed, studying her readings. The cybernetic enhancements in the alien hunters included sensory boosters and neural accelerators. If Tank could sense and counter those advantages, his intelligence level might be off our current measurement scales. Tank vocalized again, this time toward the communications array, as if he was trying to speak directly to the aliens. Vashatai's response was immediate and filled with something that sounded like excitement. The creature speaks. This confirms our theories. It is not simple animal. It is evolved hunter with intelligence. This makes it more valuable, not less. More valuable for what? Morrison demanded. For breeding, for enhancement, for creation of new hunter class. Your creature will help us become perfect predators. Sarah felt rage building in her chest. They weren't talking about Tank as if he was a sentient being. They were discussing him like livestock to be bred and modified. Tank seemed to understand this too, because his stance shifted into something she recognized as his pre-attack posture. "Over my dead body," Sarah said quietly. "That can be arranged," Vashatai replied, apparently having heard her through the open channel. "But unnecessary. Creature will cooperate to save human pack. Creatures understand pack loyalty." Tank stepped away from the communications console and moved to stand directly in front of the main display. He stared at the image of the alien ship for a long moment, then turned to look at each person on the bridge. When his gaze met Sarah's, she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch: intelligence, purpose, and a decision. Tank moved back to the communications array and began vocalizing in a complex pattern that lasted almost 30 seconds. When he finished, the bridge was completely silent. Vashatai's response, when it came, was filled with what could only be described as predatory hunger. "Yes, we understand. Creature accepts exchange to protect pack. We will collect creature and return humans." "Wait!" Sarah said desperately. "Tank! No! We'll find another way." But Tank had already moved to the main console and placed his paws on the internal communications system. His vocalization this time was clearly directed at the entire ship, broadcast through the intercom system to every section. Throughout the ship, something unprecedented happened. Other animals, pets, companion creatures, even the ship's cat, began responding to Tank's call with vocalizations of their own. The sound built into a chorus that seemed to carry meaning beyond simple animal communication. Dr. Walsh was staring at her readings in disbelief. "Captain, the biosignatures of every animal on this ship just spiked simultaneously. They're not just responding to the Wolverine, they're coordinating with it." On the alien ship, Vashatai's transmission had gone silent. After several minutes, his voice returned, but now it carried undertones of uncertainty. "This is not expected behavior. Animals do not coordinate across species. This suggests—" His transmission cut off abruptly. Sarah looked at Tank, beginning to understand that her companion had been hiding capabilities she'd never suspected. He wasn't just protecting her anymore, he was coordinating something much larger. "Tank," she whispered, "what are you planning?" Tank's response to Sarah's question wasn't verbal. It was a series of actions that demonstrated intelligence far beyond what anyone had imagined possible. He moved systematically around the bridge, touching various control interfaces with his paws, while making specific vocalizations toward different sections of the ship. Dr. Walsh was frantically recording everything. "Captain, he's accessing ship systems with deliberate intent. The pattern suggests he understands our technology at a functional level. This is unprecedented." "How is that possible?" Morrison asked. "I'm not sure it should be possible," Walsh admitted. "But the evidence is right in front of us. He's been observing human technology and behavior for years, learning and adapting. His brain capacity might be much larger than standard Earth Wolverines." Through the ship's internal communication system, they could hear animals throughout the vessel responding to Tank's calls. But now Sarah realized it wasn't random animal noise. There was structure to it, coordination. "The ship's cat is in Cargo Bay 3, reported Lieutenant Hayes, monitoring internal sensors. It just triggered the manual door release, and the maintenance chief's German Shepherd somehow activated the environmental controls in Section 7. Morrison stared at the tactical display showing the 3 alien vessels. "Are you telling me that the animals on this ship are working together?" Before anyone could answer, Vashatai's voice crackled through the communications system again, but this time it carried undertones of genuine alarm. "Human vessel, your creatures are acting outside normal behavioral parameters. This indicates coordination at intelligence level we did not detect. Explain this phenomenon." Tank looked directly at the main display and vocalized what could only be described as a challenge. The sound was deep, complex, and carried harmonics that made everyone on the bridge feel a primitive stirring in their bones, the recognition of one predator calling out another. "I think," Sarah said slowly, "Tank is telling them they made a mistake." The alien response was immediate. Creatures cannot challenge the Kithara. We are apex predators. We hunt successfully across multiple star systems. Your animals are prey species with limited cognitive capability. Tank's reply was a sound that Sarah had never heard before, a vocalization that seemed to combine the howl of a wolf, the roar of a lion, and something entirely unique. Throughout the ship, every animal responded with their own calls, creating a symphony of coordination that sent chills down Sarah's spine. Dr. Walsh looked up from her instruments with wonder and fear. Captain, the harmonic frequencies they're producing are affecting the ship's hull resonance. It's subtle, but they're creating vibrations at specific intervals. What kind of vibrations? Morrison asked. Before Walsh could answer, Tank moved to the engineering console and began a new pattern of vocalizations, this time directed toward the ship's intercom system. The sounds he made were picked up and amplified throughout the vessel. Lieutenant Hayes suddenly looked alarmed. Captain, I'm reading massive power fluctuations in the cargo bays. It looks like the magnetic containment systems are being activated manually. Manually by whom? That's just it, sir. There's no one in those sections, but the activation sequences are being entered correctly. Sarah watched Tank coordinate his strange plan and began to understand what he was doing. He's not just talking to the animals on our ship. He's been learning about our technology, our weapons, our capabilities, and now he's teaching the other animals how to use them. That's impossible, Morrison said. A few hours ago I would have agreed, Sarah replied. But Tank just killed 2 alien hunters that have been successfully raiding human ships for months. Maybe we don't understand what's possible. The alien transmission resumed, but now Vashatai's voice carried clear agitation. Human vessel, your creatures have ceased normal behavioral patterns. They appear to be manipulating your ship's systems. This level of coordination suggests enhanced intelligence. Explain how this was achieved. Tank looked at Sarah and made a sound that was unmistakably affectionate, the same gentle rumble he'd made when they were alone in her quarters. Then he turned back to the communications array and began the most complex vocalization yet. The sound built in layers, Tank's voice joined by the calls of animals throughout the ship, creating patterns that seemed to resonate through the hull itself. Dr. Walsh's instruments went wild trying to track all the harmonics. Captain, she said urgently, they're not just making noise. The frequency patterns are precise, coordinated, and they're affecting our ship's systems in ways I can't explain. It's as if they've figured out how to interface with our technology using acoustic resonance. On the main display, they could see the alien ships beginning to move. But instead of advancing toward the meridian's edge, they were backing away, their formation becoming defensive rather than aggressive. Vashatai's next transmission carried something that hadn't been there before: uncertainty. Your creatures emit coordination signals that match patterns used by apex predator species. This should not be possible for prey animals. We require clarification before proceeding with prisoner exchange. Tank's response was immediate and unmistakable. He looked directly at the display showing the alien ships and made a sound that needed no translation: pure, focused aggression. Every animal on the ship joined in, creating a cacophony that reverberated through the hull. But it wasn't just noise. Sarah could feel it in her bones, a rhythm that spoke to something deep and primal in human genetics. It was the sound of a pack preparing for war. Hull breach in Cargo Bay 7, Lieutenant Hayes announced. But it's controlled. The atmospheric seals are holding. Whatever's happening down there, it's deliberate. Dr. Walsh looked at her readings in amazement. Captain, the animals have somehow accessed our cargo manifests. They've located and activated every piece of emergency equipment in those bays. Environmental suits, emergency tools, portable power units. What are they planning to do with environmental suits? Morrison asked. Tank answered by moving to the tactical display and placing his paw on the section showing the alien ship's positions. Then he vocalized a pattern that was picked up and repeated by animals throughout the ship. "My God," Dr. Walsh whispered. "They're planning a counterboarding action." "That's insane," Morrison said. "Animals can't conduct boarding operations." "Animals can't coordinate ship systems either," Sarah pointed out. "But Tank's been proving that wrong for the last 20 minutes. Through the ship's internal cameras, they watched as the ship's cat, a small tabby named Newton, manipulated an equipment locker with its paws, extracting items with deliberate purpose. In another section, the maintenance chief's German Shepherd was somehow activating a tool dispenser, selecting specific instruments with careful precision. "They're equipping themselves," Morrison said in disbelief. Tank looked at Sarah and vocalized something that sounded remarkably like a question. The tone was unmistakable. He was asking for permission. "Tank, I don't understand what you're planning, but those aliens have energy weapons and cybernetic enhancements. You could get hurt." Tank's response was a gentle nuzzle against her hand, followed by a more complex vocalization that seemed directed toward the entire bridge crew. Dr. Fash, Walsh's translator, began producing fragments of meaning. Protect, family, pack, hunt together. "He's not asking for permission to go alone," Sarah realized. "He's asking us to trust him to lead." Vashatai's voice came through the communication system again, but now it carried clear alarm. "Human vessel, your creatures are exhibiting coordinated behavior beyond any known animal intelligence levels. This suggests artificial enhancement or unknown evolutionary development. We must study this phenomenon." Tank's reply was sharp and final, a sound that every human on the bridge recognized as a rejection. Then he began a new vocalization pattern, this one clearly directed toward the alien ships themselves. The effect was immediate and shocking. The alien vessel's defensive formation began to waver. Through the long-range sensors, they could detect agitation aboard the alien ships, increased activity, rapid communications between vessels, and what appeared to be defensive preparations. "They're afraid," Morrison said in amazement. "The aliens are actually afraid of our animals." Dr. Walsh nodded, studying her readings. "Captain, I think I understand what's happening. The aliens have been successful because they hunt individual prey or small groups. But what Tank has done is create a coordinated pack response. He's turned the entire animal population of our ship into a unified hunting unit." Tank moved to the main console and began working the controls with his paws, his movements deliberate and precise. The ship's tactical systems responded to his input, highlighting the alien vessel's positions and calculating approach vectors. "He's planning attack routes," Hayes said in wonder. "The Wolverine is planning actual attack routes." Through the intercom, they could hear animals moving through the ship with purpose. The sounds weren't random animal movement. They were coordinated, methodical, and heading toward specific locations. "Cargo bay airlocks are cycling," Hayes reported. "Multiple bays. And I'm reading power signatures from portable propulsion units. Captain, they're preparing to launch themselves at the alien ships." Sarah felt a moment of pure terror. "Tank, you can't survive in vacuum, even with environmental suits." Tank looked at her and made a sound that was unmistakably affectionate reassurance, then returned to his preparations. On the tactical display, they could see the alien ships continuing to back away, their movements increasingly defensive. Vashatai's next transmission was urgent. "Human vessel, halt your creature's preparations immediately. We are willing to negotiate release of prisoners without exchange." Tank paused in his work and looked toward the communications array, his head tilted as if considering the offer. Then he vocalized what could only be described as a rejection and returned to his tactical planning. "He doesn't trust them," Sarah said, "and neither do I. They took our people to use as leverage, and they only want to negotiate now because they're afraid." The sound of the ship's airlock systems activating echoed through the hull. Through the internal cameras, they could see animals throughout the ship moving with equipment toward the departure bays. Newton the cat was somehow maneuvering a portable oxygen supply unit. The German shepherd was carrying what appeared to be cutting tools in a specially adapted harness. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Walsh said. "Multi-species cooperation at this level shouldn't be possible without years of specialized training." Tank finished his work at the tactical console and moved to stand directly in front of Captain Morrison. He looked up at the human officer and vocalized something that carried unmistakable meaning, a request for final authorization. Morrison stared down at the Wolverine, clearly struggling with a decision no military manual had prepared him for. "You're asking me to authorize animals to conduct a boarding action against superior alien forces." Tank's response was a firm affirmative sound, followed by a gesture toward the display showing the alien ships. "The prisoners," Sarah said suddenly. "Tank knows where they're being held. That's what this is about. He's not planning to fight the aliens. He's planning a rescue mission." Dr. Walsh looked at her readings again. "The harmonic patterns he's been using, they're not just for coordination with our animals. He's been analyzing the alien ship configurations through acoustic resonance. He knows their internal layout." Morrison made his decision. "All crew members stand down from battle stations. Let's see what our unconventional allies can accomplish." Tank's response was immediate and joyful, a sound that brought answering calls from animals throughout the ship. Then he bounded toward the door, pausing only to look back at Sarah with what could only be described as a promise that he would return safely. As Tank led his unlikely pack toward their mission, Sarah realized that humanity's relationship with their animal companions had just evolved in ways no one could have predicted. The aliens had come hunting for weak prey, and instead found something they'd never encountered before: Earth's predators working together with intelligence, purpose, and loyalty that transcended species boundaries. The hunt was about to begin, but this time, the humans and their animal companions would be doing the hunting.